Now, every relation and function have what we call domain and range. Okay, so now what are domain and range? Okay, so domain is the set of inputs while range is the set of outputs. Okay, they are sets. Let's keep that in mind because when we write them, we really have to show that they are sets. And here are examples. So let's start with this table. Now, like we said, domain is just a set of inputs. So all we have to do is write these inputs and write them as a set. So we usually include this curly brackets to write our set. And in this case as well, notice that Toyota repeats as an input, and therefore you do not need to write it twice in our domain. And thus our domain is only the set Toyota, Volkswagen, and Honda. Okay. Now similarly, our range, remember, is the set of outputs. So in this case, our range are these ones on the right column, which are Camry, Jetta, Accord, and Prius. And that's it. That's how we write domain and range. Now let's see another example. What if I give you ordered pairs? Now remember, the first object or the first thing on the ordered pair, it represents the input. Okay, so these ones that I'm pointing the purple arrows now are the inputs, and that's how I write my domain. Again, my domain is just the set of inputs. So it's Connecticut, Massachusetts, Maine, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Vermont. Similarly, keep in mind that the second object or second number in this case in the ordered pair represents the output. Okay, so our range therefore is the set 3, 4, 7, and 11. Now, as I said earlier, the output 4 here shows up 3 times, but when we write the range, we only need to write the number 4 one time. Okay, let's see another example. Say we have this mapping. Now this one is very straightforward because everything usually would just be written one time. I mean, they should be. So our inputs are January, February, March, April, May, June, July. That is, again, our domain. And that domain, we could also represent it by just saying the domain are the months from January to July. And our range, as you can see here on the right side, our range constitutes of the numbers 28, 29, 30, and 31. Okay, so with the mapping, it's very straightforward. The left side, that's your domain. The right side, that's your range. Now let's see in the graph. Okay, so in the graph, you really have to know how to name the points. So this one is 1, 1. This is 2, 4. This is 3, 9. And this is 4, 16. So it's just like what we did earlier with ordered pairs. The first numbers, okay, in this case, the x values, those represent the domain 1, 2, 3, 4, and the range, as always, is the set of outputs. So it's 1, 4, 9, 16. And that's how we find the domain and the range if we're given a graph. And lastly, there are graphs which, actually no, this is not the next one that I'll do is not the last one, but say we have this graph. Okay, we can just say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 as the domain, or 0, because we can also have, say, 0.5, we can have 1.1. Okay. In this case, then we cannot just list them. That's the point what I'm trying to make here is that in a continuous graph, we cannot just list the inputs and list the outputs. We can say, though, collectively that the domain here are the times, okay, from 0 to 6 hours, okay, because the graph went from here to 6 hours. So that's our domain. And our range, it went from 0 miles to 60 miles, the maximum that we reach. Okay, so that's how we represent this. Because we cannot list them one at a time, which we were able to do earlier, and therefore all we can do here is describe it in words. Actually, there is a notation to do this to represent these domain and range, but we're gonna save that for later. And lastly, we can have the following graph, and in this case the red graph just keeps on continuing, and thus the domain is all real numbers because it just keeps on going on forever. So our x values, it just keeps on going to the left and keeps going to the right. But the y values, as you can see in the graph, the minimum is 0, okay, like at this point, at this point, at this point, and the maximum is 8. I mean, those points that I marked. And thus the range are all numbers from 0 to 8. Okay, and that concludes this lesson on finding domain and range. Again, make sure the domain is the set of inputs and the range is the set of outputs.